What if I told you that a single elevator surveillance video would become one of the most analyzed pieces of footage in internet history? That a 21-year-old student's tragic death would spawn countless theories ranging from murder conspiracies to supernatural encounters? This is the story of Elisa Lam, whose mysterious death at the infamous Cecil Hotel in Los Angeles continues to haunt investigators and internet sleuths alike. On January 31, 2013, Elisa Lam checked into the Cecil Hotel for what should have been simple stopover during her solo trip along the West Coast. She was never seen alive again. But before we dive into the mystery that captivated millions worldwide, we need to understand the dark history of the place where Elisa spent her final days. Welcome to the Cecil Hotel, a building so steeped in death and despair that some call it cursed. I'm your host, and for the next hour, we'll examine every detail, every theory, and every piece of evidence in this baffling case. From the eerie elevator footage that went viral to the shocking discovery in the water tank, we'll explore what really happened to Elisa Lam. But I warn you, the deeper we dig, the more questions arise, and some of the theories we'll discuss might challenge everything you think you know about this case. Let's begin our journey into one of the 21st century's most perplexing mysteries: the Cecil Hotel's dark history, 5 o'clock to 12 o'clock. To understand Elisa Lam's story, we must first explore the notorious history of the Cecil Hotel. Built in 1924 in downtown Los Angeles, the Cecil was originally designed as a luxurious destination for business travelers and tourists. But the hotel's fortunes changed dramatically with the Great Depression and the changing demographics of downtown LA. By the 1950s, the Cecil had transformed into a magnet for society's most troubled individuals. The hotel's location on South Main Street placed it in the heart of Skid Row, an area plagued by homelessness, addiction, and crime. What happened next would cement the Cecil's reputation as one of America's most haunted hotels. In 1947, the Cecil became connected to one of Los Angeles' most famous unsolved murders. Elizabeth Short, known as the Black Dahlia, was allegedly seen at the hotel's bar just days before her brutal murder. Though never officially confirmed, this connection added to the hotel's growing dark mystique. But the Black Dahlia case was just the beginning of the Cecil's association with death. Between 1931 and 1995, at least 16 deaths occurred at the hotel, with many being suicides from the building's upper floors and roof. The frequency of these deaths earned the Cecil the nickname the Suicide Hotel. In 1964, a woman named Goldie Osgood was found murdered in her room, sexually assaulted and strangled. Her killer was never found. But perhaps the most chilling chapter in the Cecil's history involves serial killers who actually lived at the hotel. In the 1980s, Richard Ramirez, known as the Night Stalker, stayed at the Cecil while terrorizing Los Angeles. Ramirez would return to his room on the hotel's 14th floor after committing his heinous crimes throughout the city. Hotel staff later reported that Ramirez's room constantly reeked of death and decay. But Ramirez wasn't the only serial killer to call the Cecil home. In 1991, Jack Unterweger, an Austrian serial killer, stayed at the hotel while on assignment as a journalist. Unterweger murdered 3 sex workers during his stay, adding to the hotel's body count. By the time Elisa Lam checked in during 2013, the Cecil had attempted to rebrand itself. The lower floors had been converted into a hostel called Stay on Main, targeting budget travelers and backpackers. But despite the cosmetic changes, the building's dark energy seemed impossible to escape. Staff members reported strange occurrences: elevators moving on their own, unexplained, sounds and an overwhelming sense of dread in certain areas. Guests frequently complained about disturbing dreams and feeling watched. The hotel's reputation had become so notorious that it attracted dark tourism, visitors who came specifically because of its morbid history. This was the environment that 21-year-old Elisa Lam entered on that fateful January evening in 2013. A place where the line between reality and nightmare had been blurred by decades of tragedy. Elisa Lam, the person behind the mystery, 12 o'clock to 18 o'clock. Before we examine the mystery surrounding her death, let's get to know Elisa Lam as a person. Born in Vancouver, Canada, in 1991, Elisa was described by friends and family as intelligent, creative, and compassionate. She was a student at the University of British Columbia, studying psychology with dreams of becoming a writer. Elisa was an active blogger who wrote thoughtfully about literature, fashion, and her personal struggles. Her blog, Ether Fields, revealed a young woman grappling with mental health challenges, including depression and bipolar disorder. In her writings, Elisa was remarkably open about her experiences with medication and therapy. She wrote, "I have anxiety problems and depression, and it's something I've been dealing with since I was in high school." But Elisa was also someone who found joy in travel and new experiences. In January 2013, she embarked on a solo trip along the West Coast, visiting San Diego and then Los Angeles. Her parents were initially concerned about her traveling alone, but Elisa assured them she was feeling well and looking forward to the adventure. She maintained regular contact with her family through phone calls and social media posts. Friends described Elisa as someone who was generally cautious and responsible, making her subsequent disappearance all the more puzzling. On January 26, 2013, Elisa checked into the Cecil Hotel, planning to stay for several days, before continuing her journey to Santa Cruz. She had booked a shared dormitory room at the Stay on Main hostel for $65 per night. Initially, Elisa was placed in a shared room with other travelers, but her roommates complained about her behavior. According to reports, Elisa would turn lights on and off at odd hours and exhibit other strange behaviors that made her roommates uncomfortable. Hotel management moved her to a private room on the 5th floor to address these complaints. For the first few days, Elisa seemed to be enjoying her Los Angeles experience. She posted photos on social media showing her exploring downtown LA, visiting bookstores, and trying local restaurants. Her last blog post, written during her stay at the Cecil, was upbeat and optimistic about her travels. But according to her family, their last conversation with Elisa occurred on January 31st, 2013. Her parents, David and Yeno Lam, said Elisa sounded normal during their phone call, discussing her plans for the next day. She was supposed to check out of the hotel on February 1st and continue her journey north. When Elisa failed to call home as planned, her parents immediately knew something was wrong. This wasn't like their daughter, who was diligent about staying in touch during her travels. The Lam family contacted the Los Angeles Police Department, reporting Elisa missing on February 1st. What followed was an investigation that would baffle police, captivate the internet, and raise more questions than answers. But to understand what happened to Elisa, we need to examine the timeline of her final days at the Cecil Hotel. The final days. Timeline of disappearance, 18 o'clock to 25 minutes and 0 seconds. Let's reconstruct Elisa Lam's final days using security footage, witness statements, and police reports. January 31st, 2013. This would be the last day anyone would see Elisa Lam alive. Hotel staff members reported seeing her in the lobby earlier that morning, appearing normal and checking her phone. Around 1 p.m., Eliza was captured on the hotel's security cameras entering an elevator on the ground floor. This footage would later become the most analyzed piece of evidence in the entire case. But we'll examine that crucial video in detail shortly. After the elevator incident, Eliza seemingly vanished without a trace. She didn't return to her room that night, and hotel staff noticed her absence during routine checks. February 1st, 2013, Eliza was supposed to check out this morning and catch a train to Santa Cruz. When she failed to appear at the front desk, hotel management attempted to contact her in her room. There was no response to phone calls or knocking on her door. Meanwhile, hundreds of miles away in Vancouver, Elisa's parents were growing increasingly worried. She had promised to call them after checking out, but the call never came. By evening, the Lam family contacted LAPD to report their daughter missing. February 2nd, 2013, police arrived at the Cecil Hotel to begin their investigation. Officers searched Elisa's room and found all her belongings still inside, including her laptop, clothes, and personal items. Her identification and credit cards were all present, ruling out the possibility that she had simply decided to extend her trip. Detective Wallace Tennant was assigned to lead the case. He immediately recognized this wasn't a typical missing person case. A young woman doesn't just disappear from a hotel, leaving all her possessions behind. Police began interviewing hotel staff and guests who might have seen Eliza. Several witnesses reported seeing her acting strangely in the days leading up to her disappearance. Some described her as appearing paranoid, looking over her shoulder frequently, and avoiding eye contact. Others mentioned she seemed to be talking to someone who wasn't there. February 3rd to 6th, 2013, police expanded their search beyond the hotel. Officers canvassed the surrounding Skid Row area, showing Elisa's photo to homeless, individuals, and business owners. They checked local hospitals, morgues, and detention centers. LAPD also reached out to Amtrak and bus stations in case Eliza had tried to continue her journey. Every lead came up empty. February 7th to 13th, 2013. As days turned into weeks, the investigation intensified. Police brought in search and rescue teams with dogs to comb through the hotel's many floors and hidden spaces. The Cecil Hotel was a maze of corridors, storage areas, and maintenance spaces that could potentially hide a person. Investigators also began reviewing the hotel's extensive security camera system. The Cecil had cameras in hallways, elevators, and common areas. It was during this review that they discovered the elevator footage that would soon shock the world. February 14th, 2013. In a desperate move to generate new leads, LAPD decided to release the elevator security footage to the public. They hoped someone might recognize Elisa's behavior or provide information about what they were seeing. The 4-minute video was uploaded to YouTube and immediately went viral. Within hours, millions of people around the world were analyzing every frame of the disturbing footage. The video showed Elisa's bizarre behavior in the elevator, but it also raised more questions than it answered. What was she looking at outside the elevator? Why did the doors stay open for so long? Who was she seemingly talking to? The infamous elevator video, 25 minutes and 0 seconds to 35 minutes and 0 seconds. Now we reach the most crucial piece of evidence in this entire mystery, the elevator. Surveillance footage. This 4-minute video would become one of the most watched and analyzed pieces of security footage in internet history. But what exactly did the video show, and why did it disturb so many people? The timestamp on the footage shows January 31st, 2030, at approximately 1 p.m. Elisa's last known sighting. The video begins with Eliza entering the elevator normally, appearing calm as she presses up. button for an upper floor, but then something strange happens, or doesn't happen, depending on your interpretation. The elevator doors, which should close automatically after a few seconds, remain open. Elisa stands inside, waiting, and starts pressing multiple buttons on the control panel. Frantically, she presses buttons for floors 4, 5, 10, and 7, then the door close button multiple times. Still, the doors don't close. This is when Elisa's behavior becomes increasingly erratic. She steps partially out of the elevator, looking left and right down the hallway as if checking for someone or something. Her movements appear cautious, almost fearful, like she's trying to avoid detection. Elisa then steps back into the elevator and moves to the corner, pressing herself against the wall. From this position, she's hidden from view of anyone who might be standing outside the elevator. She remains in this corner for about 30 seconds, occasionally peeking out toward the doors. Then, Elisa steps out of the elevator completely and stands to the left of the doors. What happens next is the most unsettling part of the entire video. Elisa begins making hand gestures that appear to be animated conversation with someone. Her arms move expressively, her hands gesture upward and outward, and her lips appear to be moving as if she's speaking. But there's no one visible in the hallway with her. The gestures continue for nearly a minute, with Elisa appearing to respond to someone or something outside the camera's view. At times, her gestures seem angry or frustrated, other times pleading or explanatory. Then, abruptly, Elisa stops the apparent conversation and looks directly at the elevator. She approaches the doors and presses more buttons, still trying to get the elevator to function normally. Finally, she walks away down the hallway, moving out of the camera's range. Within moments of her departure, the elevator doors finally close, as if they were waiting for her to leave. This detail would become one of the most debated aspects of the entire video. Internet users immediately began dissecting every frame of the footage. Some noticed that the timestamp had been edited or obscured, leading to conspiracy theories about tampering. Others focused on Elisa's hand movements, with some claiming they resembled sign language or ritualistic gestures. The most popular theories fell into several categories. First, the mental health explanation. Elisa was experiencing a psychotic episode related to her bipolar disorder. Supporters of this theory pointed to her known mental health struggles and suggested she might have been off her medication. Second, the supernatural explanation. Elisa was interacting with ghosts or spirits, particularly given the Cecil Hotel's haunted reputation. Third, the conspiracy theory. Someone was threatening Elisa outside the camera's view, and the video had been edited to hide evidence of foul play. Fourth, the drug-related theory. Elisa had consumed hallucinogenic substances either voluntarily or involuntarily. Each theory had passionate supporters who pointed to different aspects of the video as evidence. Mental health advocates noted that psychotic episodes can cause exactly the kind of behavior seen in the video. Paranormal enthusiasts highlighted the elevator's malfunction and Elisa's apparent interaction with invisible entities. Conspiracy theorists focused on the video's timestamp issues and questioned why certain angles weren't shown. But perhaps most disturbing was how normal Elisa appeared at the beginning of the video. She entered the elevator like any regular hotel guest, showing no signs of distress or unusual behavior. The transformation from normal to erratic happened entirely within those 4 minutes of footage. This sudden change would become central to understanding what might have happened to Elisa Lam. But the elevator video was just the beginning of this mystery. The most shocking discovery was still to come. The water tank discovery 35 minutes and 0 seconds to 42 minutes and 0 seconds. For 19 days after Elisa Lam's disappearance, the Cecil Hotel continued operating normally. Guests checked in and out, unaware that they were staying in a building where a young woman had mysteriously vanished. But by mid-February, guests began complaining about problems with the hotel's water supply. The complaints started small. Guests mentioned that the water pressure was low in their rooms. Some said the water had an unusual taste, describing it as metallic or sweet. Others complained about a strange odor coming from the tap water. Most disturbing of all, several guests reported that the water was coming out black or dark colored. Hotel management initially dismissed these complaints as typical plumbing issues in an old building. The Cecil was nearly 90 years old, and water problems weren't uncommon. But as more guests complained, and some even checked out early because of the water issues, management realized they had a serious problem. On February 19, 2013, hotel maintenance worker Santiago Lopez was sent to the roof to inspect the water tanks. The Cecil Hotel had 4 large water tanks on its roof that supplied water to the entire building. These cylindrical tanks were each about 10 feet tall and 8 feet wide, holding thousands of gallons of water. Lopez climbed the ladder to the roof, expecting to find a simple mechanical issue or perhaps debris in the system. What he discovered would haunt him for the rest of his life. Looking into the first tank, Lopez saw what appeared to be a person floating face down in the water. The body was naked and in an advanced state of decomposition. Lopez immediately called 911, and within minutes, the Cecil Hotel was swarming with police, firefighters, and coroners. The Los Angeles Fire Department had to drain the entire tank and use specialized equipment to remove the body. It was a complex operation that took several hours to complete safely. Preliminary identification confirmed what investigators already suspected. This was Elisa Lam. The 21-year-old student had been dead for nearly 3 weeks, floating in the hotel's water supply. This meant that for 19 days, hotel guests had been drinking, bathing, and brushing their teeth with water that contained Elisa's decomposing body. The psychological impact on the guests who learned this information was devastating. Many required counseling, and several filed lawsuits against the hotel. But the discovery of Elisa's body only deepened the mystery surrounding her death. How had she gotten into the water tank? Was it suicide, murder, or something else entirely? The physical logistics of accessing the water tanks were puzzling to investigators. To reach the tanks, someone would need to access the roof, which required either climbing a fire escape or going through a locked rooftop door. Hotel security footage showed no evidence of Elisa accessing the roof through the internal stairway. The fire escape was visible from the street, and no witnesses reported seeing anyone climbing it on January 31st. Even more puzzling was the water tank itself. The tanks had heavy lids that were difficult to move, even for maintenance workers. The lid on the tank containing Elisa's body was found open, but how had she managed to open it herself? And if someone else had opened it, why was there no evidence of another person's involvement? Investigators also struggled to understand how Elisa could have closed the lid behind herself. If this was a suicide, the physical evidence seemed to contradict every possible explanation. Adding to the mystery was Elisa's state when she was found. Her clothes were discovered floating separately in the tank, neatly arranged as if they had been deliberately placed there. This detail would become another major point of debate among those following the case. Why would someone remove their clothes before entering the water tank? Was this evidence of foul play, or could there be an innocent explanation? The investigation and autopsy, 42 minutes and 0 seconds to 48 minutes and 0 seconds. With Elisa Lam's body finally recovered, investigators hoped that forensic evidence would, provide answers to the questions that had been mounting for weeks. The autopsy was conducted by the Los Angeles County Coroner's Office under the supervision of Chief Medical Examiner Dr. Lakshmanan Satyabhajaswaran. The examination would take several weeks to complete as investigators tested for everything from drugs and toxins to signs of physical trauma. The preliminary findings were puzzling and contradictory. First, there were no obvious signs of physical trauma on Elisa's body. No evidence of blunt force injuries, stab wounds, or strangulation. This seemed to rule out violent homicide, but it didn't explain how she had died. The toxicology results were equally confusing. Tests showed that Eliza had several prescription medications in her system, but at levels lower than would be expected for someone taking them regularly. The medications included Lamictal, Seroquel, and Effexor, all drugs commonly prescribed for bipolar disorder and depression. However, the levels were so low that investigators wondered if Eliza had stopped taking her medication or was taking it irregularly. This finding supported theories that Eliza might have been experiencing a mental health crisis. But the toxicology results also revealed something unexpected: traces of alcohol in her system. This was puzzling because Eliza was not known to be a heavy drinker, and the levels suggested she had consumed alcohol shortly before her death. Most importantly, no illegal drugs or hallucinogens were found in her system. This disappointed some investigators who had theorized that drug use might explain her erratic behavior in the elevator video. The cause of death was officially ruled as accidental drowning. However, this ruling was immediately controversial and remains disputed to this day. Critics argued that the circumstances were too unusual for an accidental death. How does someone accidentally end up naked in a sealed water tank on a hotel roof? The coroner's office defended their ruling by pointing to several factors. First, there was no evidence of homicide, no defensive wounds, no signs of struggle, no foreign DNA. Second, Elisa's mental health history suggested she might have been experiencing a psychotic episode. Third, the low levels of medication in her system indicated she might not have been properly treating her condition. But even with these factors, many questioned how the death could be considered purely accidental. Detective Wallace Tennant, who led the investigation, remained troubled by several aspects of the case. He noted that the hotel's security was surprisingly lax for such a notorious building. The door to the roof was supposed to be locked and alarmed, but investigators found that the alarm system was not functioning properly. This meant someone could potentially access the roof without detection. Additionally, the hotel's security camera system had several blind spots. The cameras didn't cover all hallways, and there were no cameras on the roof itself. This made it impossible to definitively track Elisa's movements after she left the elevator. Perhaps most frustrating for investigators was the hotel's management and staff. Several employees gave conflicting statements about their interactions with Eliza. Some claimed they had never seen her behaving strangely, while others reported obvious signs of distress. The lack of consistent witness testimony made it difficult to establish a clear timeline of Elisa's final days. Detective Tennant also noted that the Cecil Hotel's history created additional challenges for the investigation. The building's reputation attracted people who were often reluctant to cooperate with police. Many of the hotel's long-term residents had criminal backgrounds or mental health issues that made them unreliable witnesses. Theories and conspiracies: 48 minutes and 0 seconds to 55 minutes and 0 seconds. With the official investigation concluded, but many questions unanswered, the internet became a breeding ground for theories about what really happened to Elisa Lam. These theories ranged from plausible to bizarre, but each attracted passionate believers who pointed to different pieces of evidence. The most mainstream theory focused on Elisa's mental health condition. Psychiatrists and medical experts who reviewed the case suggested that Elisa was likely experiencing a manic or psychotic episode. Dr. Michael Wellner, a forensic psychiatrist, analyzed the elevator video and concluded that Elisa's behavior was consistent with someone suffering from severe mental illness. He noted that psychotic episodes can cause hallucinations, paranoid behavior, and poor decision-making that could lead someone to dangerous situations. The low medication levels in Elisa's system supported this theory, suggesting she might have stopped taking her prescribed drugs. Mental health advocates argued that this explanation didn't require conspiracy theories or supernatural elements. It was simply a tragic result of untreated illness. But critics of this theory pointed out several problems. If Elisa was experiencing a psychotic episode, how did she manage to navigate the complex route to the roof and access the water tank? Why were her clothes arranged so neatly in the water? And most importantly, how did she close the heavy tank lid behind herself? The second major theory involved foul play by hotel staff or other guests. Conspiracy theorists noted that several hotel employees gave conflicting statements to police. They also pointed to the hotel's history of covering up incidents to protect its reputation. Some theorists suggested that Elisa had been murdered by someone with access to the hotel's restricted areas, possibly a maintenance worker or security guard. According to this theory, the elevator video was edited to remove evidence of the perpetrator, and the subsequent investigation was deliberately mishandled. Supporters of this theory cited the timestamp discrepancies in the elevator footage and the elevator, unusual behavior of hotel management during the investigation. The third major theory involved supernatural explanations. Given the Cecil Hotel's reputation for being haunted, many people believed that Elisa had encountered malevolent spirits. This theory gained traction because of Elisa's apparent interaction with invisible entities in the elevator video. Paranormal investigators who visited the hotel claimed to have detected unusual electromagnetic activity and recorded unexplained sounds. Some even suggested that Elisa's death was connected to the hotel's previous tragedies, part of a pattern of supernatural influence. A fourth theory involved government conspiracy or mind control experiments. This theory, while lacking credible evidence, gained surprising popularity online. Believers suggested that Elisa was the victim of CIA or military psychological experiments, possibly involving drugs or electronic manipulation. They pointed to the unusual nature of her behavior and the apparent gaps in the investigation as evidence of a cover-up. Perhaps the most creative theory involved the connection to a 2002 horror film called Dark Water. The movie featured a young girl who dies in a hotel water tank, and the circumstances were remarkably similar to Elisa's case. Some theorists suggested this was evidence that Elisa's death was planned or staged to mirror the film. Others believed it was simply an eerie coincidence that added to the case's mysterious nature. Internet sleuths also discovered connections between Elisa's case and a tuberculosis test called Lam Elisa. This test was being distributed in Los Angeles around the time of Elisa's death, leading to wild theories about biological warfare or pharmaceutical conspiracies. While medical experts dismissed these connections as